I always thought these things were kind of dumb and pointless unless you're like having to set up a shot on a hill or something like that. But I bought one on sale recently, and they're actually really useful and super, super well made. Really durable little guys. Well, it's kind of a bittersweet day today in Fireside Land. This is our final episode in what has been such an incredible series with Carson Hill of Neuma Tattoo Machines. I've enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed the long discussions. I enjoyed going back through and editing the episodes. I learned more each time that I listened. I've thought more and more about what's happening in the skin each time that I've tattooed since we've done this episode, and I just can't thank Carson enough for sharing his time and his brain. I also want to take a second and thank my great friend Ty Pilata for making that introduction. Of course, like everyone else, I knew who Carson was. I knew he was kind of a pioneer in machine building. Machine technology, but I didn't know him personally. And Ty made that introduction, and that's kind of what the catalyst for this series. So thank you, my buddy Ty. We do still have today's episode, and that is the sweet part of this bittersweet story. In this episode, we talk a bit about battery power versus traditional power supplies, just the pros and cons of each, and why you might choose one over the other. If you are going to go with battery, Carson makes a recommendation on the types of batteries or the features of the batteries to consider. We also talk about how to choose a brand of tattoo machine, and that goes kind of just beyond what machine to buy, what type of machine to buy, and more into the company themselves and what they stand for and what they're about and what you can expect from them going forward. Because as you know, you buy a tattoo machine and it's kind of an ongoing relationship you have with that machine. Things break, things need to be replaced. You may have questions, and Carson wanted to share a little bit about his philosophy on machine building and on why you start a company that builds tattoo machines. And quickly before we dive into the episode, if you have not yet picked up one of these little guys right here and you are in the market for a new machine, this Neuma 4 is really something unique in pen style machines. You can get 10% off with the code Fireside in the video description below. While you're down there clicking around, if you find yourself in an extra clicky mood, you can also get discounts on the annual subscription to Reinventing the Tattoo, Become a Better Tattooer with Guy Aitchison, and all of their tattoo education content. If you need to run a more successful, smoother, automated tattoo business, TSM Pro is offering $50 per month off of their services. There's a link down there for that too. And if you find that you're running low on stencil paper, transfer gel, tattooing gels, things like that, be sure to click on our affiliate S8 tattoo link and you'll get 10% off of all of their supplies with the code Fireside. Thank you guys as always for supporting what we do. I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope that you've enjoyed this series. Like I had mentioned several weeks back, we will go through and put out just one long format episode that will be several hours long of all of this content unedited. So be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks. Thanks again for supporting what we do. Enjoy the episode. What should you consider using batteries versus using power supplies?
Okay, so there are benefits to both, and that's, nowadays the battery movement it's moved so fast that I think the conversation has been left behind. Like, why do we use batteries? Why would we choose not to? I don't use batteries, and there's a couple of reasons for it. The benefits that I think I get out of using a good power supply, by the way, there's good power supplies and not so good ones.
As a quick drop in, Ty Pilata and I did an episode on power supplies where he did a few comparisons. That's really a great episode. I'll link to it somewhere around here.
Cool.
Go ahead. So
yeah, using a good power supply, you're going to get clean, predictable power all the time. You're going to get, we talked a little bit about flow and energy flowing through hallways and that kind of thing. If your energy is getting choked out, or, it's like there's voltage and everything. And, we're not talking about like, I can turn it up to 10, I can turn it up to 12, I can turn it up to 18 or whatever it is. If it's only pushing 1 amp and it's through, and it still turns up to 18 volts. It's weak. You know what I mean? So if you can find a power supply or use a power supply that will push through 5 amps predictably, then you will have the clean, predictable power. Your machine's not going to jump around and it's not going to vary.
Right.
And I think that you cannot depend on batteries in the same way that you can on a power supply. That, and I think also it changes the ergonomics. It changes the ergonomic dynamic of the machine. And so if it is convenient and fits in and it's balanced and it fits in your hand just right, and then you add a battery, now all of a sudden the shape changed, the weight position, the location of the weight has changed, and
Yeah.
I see that as a downfall personally. Of course, then the upside of battery is you're cordless, so you don't have to like my cord, kick it out of the way, that kind of thing. I can stand up and walk around the client and really quick do something over there and not have to worry about like draping my cord around or anything like that.
Yeah,
I've just gotten used to the cord that to me, it's not a thing, but I can see the benefit of that.
Yeah, and I mean, you just nailed it. That's obviously a very short conversation on this topic. Although we have a few other points to hit, but the benefits are it is nice not to be rolling over your clip cord all the time or nowadays RCA. But I've noticed it. I've been using, and I did an episode not too long ago. I'm sure a bunch of people who are going to watch this have already seen. Kingpin sent me out the critical battery packs.
Yeah, I got one of those too.
Yeah, and I've been using up to that time. I've been using the Amazon battery packs, and they're like $37 to $40, and then now I've been using the criticals, and I constantly hear fluctuations, in all of them. Of course, you always wonder, like, well, is it the RCA? Is it the contact? Is it the battery? Is it the what is it? Because I know when I used to use clip cords on coils, I would have fluctuations too. But that probably had more to do with the variables of the coil machine,
or the power supply,
or maybe the power supply, right?
Yeah, if you're using, like, I've been using the Muso Toku, has guaranteed 5 amps coming through it and up to 10, and I don't really notice any ups and downs at all.
That's Ty has mentioned that. So that just to clarify, and we talked about that if people want to go more in depth. We Ty and I talked about the Muso Toku in that last episode that I was talking about. But the difference in voltage, which is potential, and amps, which is the actual draw, the usage. A lot of times you can have this set at this many volts, but the amperage can be variable, and sometimes you'll see like this many volts and this many starting amps, and then this many continuous amps.
Yeah,
and those are the things that you want to pay closer attention to, are the continuous amps.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more the better. Since you mentioned the critical, that's the one that we recommend. We recommend either the critical or those Amazon ones as a cheap alternative. Like if somebody doesn't want to spend $200 for the critical, then the Amazon is a good second choice, just because they can be adjusted to the 1/10 of a volt in increments.
Okay.
And I think that matters. I don't think 1/2 volt is enough of a fine tuning, because it's a big jump, especially because of that whole, we were talking about that cadence and harmony between your circles, speed and so forth. I think that sometimes the 0.1 volts makes the difference. So
yeah,
the downside to that Amazon is that its shape isn't, the critical cylindrical, and so you kind of keeping with the pen profile.
Yeah, the RCA is right in the center of the battery, and so everything is perfectly balanced. Yeah. When you were talking earlier about the weight, that's one thing I will say about the critical is that, and I'm using it on the Neuma 4, and it clamps on super tight, and I don't really notice it, being on there. It doesn't get in my way or anything like that.
How much time are you getting out of those things?
I haven't run out of battery yet. I work from noon until 6. Well, I do one tattoo a day, noon until 6, and it usually shows. That's the one thing about the critical is that it shows how much battery is actually left, and it always shows that it's still half of a battery at the end of the day. So I'm not having any trouble at all out of it. But that goes into the next point I was going to ask about how to choose the right battery for your machine. The smaller steps in voltage that you can control, the better, basically across the board, right?
Yep, I think so.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of brands that kind of have their own language, which I'm not entirely sure why they do that. Like we've all been operating on volts our whole lives, so why are we changing it to like, I'm running at like 28?
Yeah.
What do you mean 28? What does that even mean? So
right. I have seen those. Yeah. There's no reason to try to find a new conversion that someone just invented.
It's like, let me look at my chart. I mean, I guess you eventually get used to it and then you just forget about it. Or some people use those power supplies that don't even tell you what voltage you're at. And you just kind of listen and adjust. I'm a creature of habit and I like to find my numbers and then just use those numbers, every time.
What about moving along how to choose the right power supply for your machine? We might have just hit on it. Just focus more on amperage, continuous amperage, rather than voltage.
Yep, I think. Nowadays they all have a lot of the similar features that are like the conveniences, like the magnetic base, so you can stick it to a metal thing, or presets and stuff like that. I would say I wouldn't get too carried away with insisting on certain features. Find the ones, like the basic ones are all that I ever really use. What's more important to me is the amperage, like we talked about, the power delivery, and maybe the interface. I like the feedback of a click, 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 click or a knob. Something that's what I really like about that Muso Toku. It's like a tick. It makes this little sound, and you get a nice solid click for each. It's really nice.
I'm with you, and especially in a world, I think a lot of us crave that, especially people who used to use actual buttons. In the world of smartphones where you're just kind of touching things and you're getting no kind of feedback, sensory kind of feedback. Something that actually makes a sound when you click it is really nice. And I've got the little round critical. I don't use it now since I've been using batteries, but I've got that critical atom, maybe is what it's called. And it's now I think that the up or the down, one of them isn't actually on the button. It's kind of nearby the button. You have to feel around yep, there it is. That's the down.
So. You know what that point you just made about we crave the feedback.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when the Apple phone first got rid of the button.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And then it just had the spot where your thumb would go. Mm-hmm. But then they had that haptic, they called it haptic feedback, which was a little vibration. It simulated a button push. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
And I think they did away with it, but I think
so.
That the reason for that is because we're wait, where's the click? What's going on here? Mm-hmm. And I like clicks. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, me too. I've never bought one. Another thing completely off topic, but I'm always watching these YouTube videos for people who are all into gear, like video, audio, computer gear. And so many of them use these really expensive steel kind of mechanical keyboards. Have you ever used one of those? You know what I mean? Where it's keys that clunk and stuff.
That sounds cool, but no, I've never used that.
I've never bought one because every time I've clicked on the link to look at them, they're always $400 and $500. I'm I'm not buying that keyboard. But it has to have something to do with that kind of sensory feedback, the feel of a keyboard that you can feel the buttons. I've got this MacBook Pro and I just kind of barely pull my finger over the buttons and it.
Well, what's funny is I was just thinking because I use this thing, right?
Oh,
just
yeah. Same.
Regular right. Mac thing. But I find myself when I'm typing, I'm really pushing the buttons. Yeah. I'll catch myself doing that sometimes. Why am I pushing it so hard? You don't have to do
that. Right. Yeah. There's one point that you made here before we get away from the battery versus power supply stuff. We were talking about how long a battery will last in a single session. But you you mentioned how many cycles will a battery last? And I
Yep.
was curious why you,
Well,
what was your thought about that?
I don't know the answer to the question, to be totally honest with you. But what I do know is that cycles it is relevant in battery lifespan, right? So we know that, let's say we have a phone and they tell us make sure to let the battery drain all the way. I'm sure nobody does this, right? But have the battery drain as close to zero as you can before you charge it again, and then charge it to 100, and then don't charge it and run it all the way down. And that way you'll make the battery last longer. And I think we pay less attention like on our phone, but you probably pay more attention on your MacBook. And in fact, you can go on your MacBook, click the Apple, and somewhere in there, it'll tell you how many cycles you have charged your battery. And it's because there's a certain amount, like computer geeks probably know the number off the top of their head. There's a certain amount of cycles where you can start to expect the battery life to be done. And so I don't know that that's something that we've gotten to yet in tattooing, but that's going to be relevant at some point. That, like the reason they say discharge all the way to close to zero as you can and then recharge is because if you don't, if let's say you go down to 50 and back up to 100 and you're always doing it like that, what you're actually, even though your phone is saying 100%, you're actually not at 100% of what it was originally. You might be at 80% of what the battery used to do. And then as time goes on, the more you do that, the less, like right now you're saying that you're getting 6 hours and it still says half. I'd be curious, after 6 months of doing that, does it still do that? Because my guess is the answer is no. And that, in other words, these batteries aren't going to last forever.
Right.
Right. And I'm curious myself, how many cycles will it last? Like charge cycles.
Yeah. And I wonder what the difference is. We just did this episode on the $40 Amazon battery versus the critical battery, but it was all kind of like, of course, they're both fairly new, and they function just fine. So it was more about the what am I trying to say? Like the features of each one. Like this one shows how much life is left, and this one's more balanced, or whatever. Right. But I wonder how much difference there might be between a $200 battery, the number of cycles it has to its life, and a $40 battery.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So yeah, I mean, in that case, if that's something that you're concerned about, you don't want to buy another battery, maybe you stick with power supplies.
Well, power supplies also, I mean, you can't tattoo if the power goes out, I guess, but
yeah,
it's reliable, in my opinion. Like you can always expect that the power is going to come out of the wall, in my experience.
Yeah.
And with batteries, let's say one night I was tattooing late, and I got finished with the tattoo. We went out with the client and smoked, came in, forgot to plug the battery back in. I got an 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever tattooers start tattooing the next day. And, I slept in, and I forgot again I forgot I need to plug in my battery. Now what do I do? Because it's going to take, how long does it take to charge? A couple hours, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So unless you have, so at that point, now you're $400 into a good set of batteries. Or you could have a $400 power supply, which you'll never have to think about any of that,
Right. Yeah.
And what if you forgot to charge your backup too? And I'm sure that's going to happen,
Yeah. I would always recommend it, and I've made in that last episode that I've been talking about, I made the statement that I'm like I enjoy batteries because of I can move, like you said earlier, I can move to the other side of the table. I don't have to worry about tripping over my cord, but I will always own a power supply. I'll always be prepared for my batteries to not work. Yeah. And I'll always have, I've been doing this long enough to know that I have multiples of everything that I might need. So I have more than one power supply. In fact, I know for sure one Amazon $50 or $60 power supply that's still in the plastic and has never come out of the box, just because I had one crap out and I had to go to another shop and borrow one once. And I was like, I'm just going to buy some cheap backup. And it's been sitting in my, my closet for probably 10 years, and it's still in the plastic, never opened. Maybe not that long, but a while. Yeah. So it
delivers half an amp just in case.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure it does. It'll get me through the tattoo. Okay, so we're coming down to the end here, and I think that we did a good job of saving this topic for last because you've lent all your knowledge over however many hours we've been doing this. But now, how to choose a brand of tattoo machine? What are the relevant factors? What should you consider?
What I honestly think is when it comes to choosing a brand, it's not entirely about the product that the brand is offering you, right? That there is like a sort of, so what are the relevant factors? Obviously, you want the product to work really well. You want a company that you can rely upon. You want a company that stands for the same things that you do. You want customer service to matter. You want to feel important to the people when you call them. If you have a problem with your machine, you want them to take care of it as if you were a brand new buyer and give you that same value as if you were handing them $800 or whatever it is. I think that that's super, super important. And, I learned that the hard way. I'll be honest. I wasn't always aware of the importance of and the value of all that. But I really do think that ultimately it comes down to the vision of the company. Like, what is the company all about? What do they care about? And what are they setting out to do? Not only like, can you make a tattoo machine turn around and make a cam, push a needle? But why? Why do you do it? What's the important part of, like, what's the why and behind the company? What's the vision? What's the long-term goals? And what's all of that stuff too. And then I also think when it comes to a product, like I think sometimes there's a temptation for a manufacturer to say, okay, we made a machine that it does tattoos, we're done. Now let's just sell a shitload of them, right? I see that as an opportunity to, like, okay, now what can we do? Like, what's next? What are different ways I can configure this thing? What are the different ways that I can appeal to a wider audience? How can I, like, that's when I really get geeky, we've got all these different grip choices. It's not because it's really I'm having more fun than any of my customers. I can guarantee you that. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that there's a culture involved. Like, what is it about this company that you are drawn to? That's what really it comes down to. If you're going to be loyal to a company, it better be for a good reason and not just because they have a pretty looking machine. And of course, that's just my opinion, and everybody has their own, and all of them are valid and valuable.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, like, what's next? What can I do to appeal to a wider variety of tattooers? And until we started, even when I first started seeing your different grip choices kind of coming through on your Instagram, where I was like, oh, that one's cool looking. That one's cool. I like the size of that. They were different sizes, different whatever. And I was still thinking of it more aesthetically and less functionally, because anytime I've just been trained to do that, I think, because anytime I see the majority of tattoo machine manufacturers put out a limited release something or a special something, it's either something cool about the box, it's got someone's signature in it, or maybe it's a different color, but it's all aesthetic. There's nothing really functionally different. And then when we were talking the other day, when we first started doing this series that we're wrapping up now, and you're like, oh, this is you showed me the one grip that was just like a traditional, like, stainless steel grip. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, yeah. I was like, yeah, what a great idea. Like, I never think of it being like, oh, this one's a good bit heavier. This one has the option to either hold it back here or up here. And, back when we were using stainless, like, traditional needles and tubes, I recognized it. I didn't recognize differences in tubes as a stylistic thing. I recognized it for the functionality. If it was the egg-shaped thing, it's like, oh yeah, it's shaped like an egg and it sits weird. Or it was the hourglass looking thing, or it was whatever it was, or it was the different diameter. I thought of it as being a functional feature back then, but then once we moved into rotaries, every time there was a new feature, it just seemed like an aesthetic feature to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably because I come from the deep past where it wasn't the same as it is now,
Yeah.
and not to say that it was better or anything like that, but like when I made this thing, I had an emotional reaction to this grip
Yeah.
because it reminded me of, like I sat and I was just like staring at it for so long. It reminded me of like being an apprentice, scrubbing tubes. You know what I mean? Like there's just something about it. And that's part of like my whole approach to this business is sometimes we have this tendency as we get into modern day and tech and improvements and all that is to like walk away from what's in the past. And I think that is a mistake. And I think that there's so much value in the past and where we come from that to disregard it or to forget about it is such an error that we're abandoning the thing that has worked for us so well and stepping into something that has, in comparison, doesn't have the soul, of, it's kind of like like drivers, they complain about a 6-speed manual transmission. Like it should be a 5. Like there needs to be heavy steering. If this power steering is too good, like you're not getting the feedback. Like there's a perfect balance in there somewhere. You don't want the car to do everything for you. If you're like a true driver, you want to feel the road. You want to feel the feedback. And if we were to abandon like the old school Porsches and what it was like to drive like a 1960 Ferrari or something like that, and just go completely into like the numbness of a modern, Tesla, which has, you can't even access, there's no motor, there's nothing. There's like, it feels soulless and empty in comparison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure a Tesla is fun to drive too, by the way, but
I'm sure they are. Yeah.
Get what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
There's that tactile thing. There's that like, it's just the soul and the life, the life source, that's what, I don't know if anybody knows this, but Neuma, the word, that's what it means. It's the breath of life in, like the thing that gives it's the creative force in life. It's the thing that gives you that life. It's like sort of like soul,
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And that's basically, like that's where my heart's at in all of this,
Yeah, I've enjoyed this these conversations. But one thing that stuck with me, and it comes back now as you were talking about, in our first conversation about giving the kind of, we've talked about tactile feel, but like giving the decision making or the responsiveness back to the hand of the tattooer and taking it away from the machine. We were probably talking about give. But that's a bigger statement than just that, right? I mean, it's that's kind of it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Hey, thanks again for watching. Please be sure to like and comment and subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date with all of the things that we are doing. If you would like to buy us a drink, please support us on Patreon. There's a button somewhere around here that allows you to do that. You can also visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter so you know where we're headed and what we're doing. And while you're there, please check out our merchandise page. Buy yourself a fancy new Fireside t-shirt. Thank you for supporting the Fireside Tattoo Network, and we'll see you on the next episode.